Ladies and gentlemen, the vehicle horror genre, which pretty well started with Duel and went in the late 70s, early 80s, had a lot of strange, horror genre movies. Now, this movie is one of Joseph Cotton's last movies, and unfortunately, the star of many, many big movies in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was slumming here, and it showed. Now, it's called, get this, for all you Undertakers out there, wrestling-wise or for pay, it's called Hearse. Now, the supernatural horror film is directed by George Bowers and stars the then-wife of George C. Scott, Tris Van Devere, and, of course, the great Joseph Cotton. It follows a school teacher from San Fran who relocates to a small town in Northern California to spend a summer in a house she inherited from her deceased aunt, only to uncover her aunt's past. Get this, what a surprise, as a devil worshiper, which seems to trigger a series of supernatural occurrences. Now, Jan Hardy, a school teacher in San Fran, suffers a nervous breakdown following a divorce and the simultaneous death of her mother. To emotionally recover, she decides to spend the summer in the rural town of Blackford in a home left to her by her aunt Rebecca. Upon arriving, she is given keys to the house by Walter Pritchard, played by Cotton, a local attorney who claims Jane's mother once promised to bestow him the property. Shortly after moving in, Jane begins experiencing supernatural occurrences, maybe caused by her late aunt Rebecca, including witnessing apparitions of that aunt and a ghostly black hearse driven by a mysterious man that pulls into the driveway before vanishing. Sounds like a good night gallery plot. Furthermore, she is unsettled by the locals' passive-aggressive reactions to her presence in the town, including from Pritchard, who is deliberately unhurried to place the home in her name. Now, Jane hires Paul, the son of the local hardware store owner, to help her make repairs on the home. Jane finds a trunk in the attic full of her aunt's personal mementos, including a diary in which she wrote of her life as a minister's wife. Late one night, Jane crashes her car on the way home and is given a ride by Tom Sullivan, a mysterious but kind man passing by in a vintage black car. Tom pays for a tow truck for Jane and returns the following night with her car. Jane accepts her invitation to go boating on a nearby lake. Later that night, Jane uncovers more details from Aunt Rebecca's diary that reveal Rebecca was indoctrinated by her boyfriend Robert, who was a devil worshipper, and convinced her to join him in a pact with Satan. Shortly after, Jane has a vivid nightmare in which she is taken away by the hearse as her aunt watches from the house, and Jane observes her own funeral. Jane's mental stability is further challenged by other goings-on in the home, including the sounds of what she believes are people breaking in at night. She later sees a woman from one of her nightmares at the local church, but her fears are assuaged by the Reverend Winston. Once the house is fully probated to Jane, Pritchard confirms to Jane that her aunt Rebecca worships Satan, and that upon her death, the hearse carrying the body crashed on a nearby road. The driver of the hearse, along with Rebecca's body in her coffin, inexplicably disappeared. Since this event, locals have been haunted by the image of the hearse. Meanwhile, Jane continues her romance with Tom, and after a date, invites him into her home, where they get it on. Jane's romance with Tom upsets Paul, who expresses that he, too, is attracted to her. Now, one night after Tom fails to arrive for a date, a drunken Pritchard begins vandalizing the home, causing Jane to flee in terror. Paul arrives shortly after, and to leave the flowers for Jane, only be attacked by an unseen assailant. Meanwhile, Jane arrives at Tom's house, but finds it inexplicably abandoned and dilapidated. She finds a framed antique photo of a young Rebecca with Tom. Behind the home, Jane finds a gravestone inscribed Robert Thomas Sullivan. Terrified, Jane returns to her home to pack her belongings, intending to leave. In the bathroom, she finds Pritchard's corpse hanging in a shower, along with Paul's body. Jane is confronted by Tom, who professes his love for her and explains that Rebecca was too weak and did not fulfill her pact with Satan. Promising Jane eternal life, Tom begins to cast a spell on her, but is interrupted by Reverend Winston, who begins an exorcism to save Jane. She flees in her car, followed by Tom, driving the hearse. The change ends in a collision that causes the hearse to topple off a cliff and explode. But back in the home, an apparition of Rebecca appears in a window as the house grows dark. Now, written by William Blake, produced by Mark Tesner, again, Tris Van Devere, Joseph Cotton, David Gothro, and Donald Hutton, actors. Cinematography, Morikawa. Edited by George Burnt. Music by Webster Lewis. Production company was Merrimark Productions and released by Crown International. Came out in New York, June 6, 1980. Now, the key cast: Perry Lang in an early performance as Paul Gordon. David Gothro again as Tom Sullivan. And of course Dennis Quaid as the repairman, uncredited. Now, principal photography took place in San Fran and Bradbury, California on October 29, 1979. Filming was completed by January 1980. Now, 252 Packard funeral coaches converted by the Henny Motor Company were used in the film, and one of them is prominently featured on the film's poster. Now, the Hearse premiered in New York on June 6, 1980, and then its LA premiere on September 12th of that year. Now, Roger Ebert of Chicago Sun-Times wrote, "The Hearse qualifies as this summer's garage sale of horror movies. It contains all the best cliches from recent, more successful horror movies, especially the Amityville Horror and even The Changeling, which came out last April and starred Van Devere, her husband George C. Scott, and of course the obligatory self-banging doors and self-playing musical instruments." Janet Maisel of the New York Times said The Hearse was directed by George Bowers and shot either in a very stylized fashion or without benefit of a light meter. Many of the film's outdoor scenes feature brilliant blue skies and actors with dim, shadowy faces. As far as the horror goes, Mr. Bowers makes his film moderately scary and pretty unpleasant too. No one gets a hatchet in the forehead, though, the way one of the actors does in Friday the 13th. Isn't that nice to know? Now, Rhino Entertainment released The Hearse on DVD on February 12, 2002. In May 2017, Vinegar Syndrome, what a name, released the film in a Blu-ray DVD combination pack featuring a newly restored 2K scan of the original film elements. Now, The Hearse was a drive-in movie, and the drive-in movies were starting to fade. There's no person would watch this at a big theater and take it seriously. But seeing Joseph Cotton, a great actor, is still slumming and, way too old for this type of movie. Somebody like Burgess Meredith or someone younger, maybe Tony Curtis, would have done a lot better job. Just seeing an actor of Cotton's ability in this type of movie, it was just, it's like watching The Love Boat and seeing the old actors. It doesn't play. Me, I give it 1 star out of 4. I've only seen it once, and I don't want to see it again, because basically it's another one of those satanic horror movies that really makes no sense. I don't think Satan, if he wants your soul, is going to work through a hearse. He's going to come right into your house or through your phone line or whatever. It's funny that he never did a satanic phone. That would be an interesting movie. The call for the Devil's Call sounds pretty good. You can use that if anybody's listening to that for a title. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing here, we're a vintage movie podcast on strange and obscure and interesting horror movies of the 60s, 70s, 80s. Let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, requests are always accepted and always highly considered. Bye.